What if turning the other cheek and loving our enemies are actually commands that are far more radical and subversive than we ever realized? I'm Pastor Nate. This is another episode of the Sunday School Remix. Today we're looking at some of Jesus' strange commands in the Sermon on the Mount. You can find it in Matthew chapter 5. Here we go. Welcome to the Sunday School Remix, the show where we take Bible stories you learned as a kid and look at them with fresh eyes. Each week, we dig into the context and the overlooked details, and we often discover interpretations we never heard growing up. This isn't about winning arguments, but simply hearing God's living word speak to our lives again today. So grab your Bible and put aside your assumptions, and let's dive into another episode of the Sunday School Remix. Matthew chapter 5 is Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, where he says a number of paradoxical and radical statements. Blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who weep. And it's this upside down way of looking at things that really is the hallmark of Jesus' ministry. Again and again, he seems to be trying to come in and to subvert assumptions, which is, kind of what we're trying to do on this podcast every single time, is just to give us a different way of thinking about things than how we've always done it. And so much of the start to the Sermon on the Mount is really based in this upside down theology that Jesus expresses, helping us to see that power and authority and control are not the ways that God's mercy is most strongly revealed. That in fact, God's power is most perfectly manifest in weakness. The Apostle Paul will write something similar later on. And of course, as we talked about in the crucifixion episode, the cross is that place where we see so much of that made manifest, where Jesus' ultimate claim to kingship is as one who suffers and dies for the sake of his people. And it is in the giving up of his power that somehow the most powerful promises were revealed and made manifest in creation. And so knowing all that as a framework, it helps us then look very critically and carefully at what he says later on in the Sermon on the Mount about turning the other cheek and loving our enemies. These are incredibly radical statements in terms of the turning of the other cheek. In those days, there was this system of honor and shame. I've talked about that before, but it's really hard to understate how much that governed the ways of society and just how people thought and functioned in those times. And so there was this undercurrent to most human interactions that happened where people would be honored or shamed. And in the context of turning the other cheek, if someone was below you in the social hierarchy, you would strike them with the back of your hand. That was the way to show dominance over this person and to show authority over them. So if you were to slap them like this, but then by turning the other cheek, you're offering up to them the opportunity for them to come back and strike you again. Only by turning the other cheek, what you're inviting is an open-handed slap, which is the type of striking amongst equals. So Jesus' instruction to turn the other cheek isn't one about submission or just putting up with abuse continually. It is revealing the injustice of the entire interaction itself. If someone strikes you on one cheek, offer the other cheek also. And thereby doing, you force that individual to confront their own sinfulness in the moment, and you trap them. Because if they strike you with the backhand, and now you're inviting them to strike you as an equal, they have to pause. And they're the one left in the difficult moment. If I strike them like this, I'm conceding that they're an equal to me. But if I don't strike them like this, it looks as if I'm the coward and I'm backing down. It's a pretty perverse example if we really think about it, but it's so much of this third way thinking that Jesus was constantly trying to guide people towards. And it really also sets us up for the most radical command that Jesus ever gives, which is to love our enemies. Many, many people talk about loving your neighbor, many different societies and religions, etc. But Christianity is unique in that Christ commands us to love our enemies. And what's so profound about this command is how it forces that type of third way thinking that I'm speaking about. In this interaction with the turning the other cheek, it is the striker who is forced into this moment of confrontation. Of like, wait a second, what am I doing here? Why am I striking this person? I don't want to strike them as an equal because I clearly am better than them, but I don't want to be seen as a coward. And it forces this incredible self-reflection. And loving the enemy does the exact same thing. I'm sure we're all familiar with the experience of that one person who annoys us to no end. And we can't stand being around them or the way they act. And the reason so often is because there is aspects of that person's character that feel familiar to us. We see some little aspect of ourself in that person. They are the turned up to 11 version of ourselves in some ways. I'm not saying we're exactly like the person we hate the most, but there's something about their personality that gets under our skin because we know that it's true about us as well. And that makes us so angry and annoyed because we have not yet done the hard work of recognizing and admitting our own struggles and sinfulness. We wish that this part of ourself didn't exist, that it could just be ignored and put off somewhere else. And so when we see it externally expressed in this other person, it really unsettles us. There's something haunting about it. For me personally, I know that. I can get so upset by seeing people who are just like blatant self-promoters. And yet I know that that level of egotism lives within me as well. Is that I want to be recognized for what I do, and I want to be told I'm doing a good job. For those who know the Enneagram, I'm a strong Enneagram 3, and so I need the external affirmation of people saying, look at how impressive and accomplished you are. But when I see other people chasing after that, it makes me cringe, because I'm still struggling in myself to do this work. And now in loving our enemies, that's what Christ is forcing us to confront. If we really are going to do something as radical as love our enemies, it will inherently force us to also love the parts of ourselves that we can't stand. It forces us to confront that emptiness inside of us that we see in the other. And this really is so much of what Christ's mission is constantly trying to do, is to make us confront the deep, dark emptiness, the weakness, the sinfulness, the parts of ourselves that just don't fit. And now here's where we see this happening very, very poignantly, is in the celebration of Holy Communion. I know you weren't expecting me to go here, but stick with me. Holy Communion is a gathering around the death of God. This is my body given for you. This is my blood shed for you. It is a moment of despair, or at least it seems like it should be. It is a confrontation with utter nothingness, with Jesus' death, the death of God, which should be a moment of complete despair. And yet, somehow we see that as a celebration of new life and new possibility. Because in confronting the very worst thing we could possibly imagine, together, we somehow find a way forward as a community. If we are to love our enemies, and our enemies are to love us, we build a community where we're honest about what we can't stand in ourselves, and we love it anyways, and we are able to love it in the other person as well. If we can be a community that gathers together around the death of God, that moment of deep despair, and still find new life there, it changes everything. And it is the whole story of Christ's life, of coming and giving his life away and then rising to something completely different and new, going through the deep, dark ugliness of crucifixion in order to see us through whatever deep, dark ugliness we're just trying to avoid. Because that's what loving the enemy does too, is it forces us into that moment of self-reflection, of no longer just avoiding and pretending like that's not there. No, I don't do that. I'm nothing like that. No, you are. And you need to learn it and love it. You need to learn how to love it in other people so that you can learn to love it within yourself as well. It's a completely different framing than how our life so often operates as well. And that's the frustrating part, is that none of the rest of the world is built this way. And so we get pulled into different interpretations of these commands from Jesus and of this practice of Holy Communion. It's like, no, like Holy Communion is the insider meal just for all the people that know the secrets. It's like, well, no, it's about despair and loss and God dying in order for something new to take place. Thinking of that famous book, We're Going on a Bear Hunt. Yeah, you can't go under it. You can't go around it. We've got to go through it. And by going through it together as a community, we're able to discover a completely different reality on the other side. A more redeemed, a more honest, a more true reality than the ones where we just try and ignore it. Or we just try and act better and do better. That's so often how we approach it. It becomes this life hacking thing that we do rather than like, no, I don't have it figured out and I need some support and I need some help and I need to learn how to get through this. And we'll learn how to get through it together. So that's I think there's a lot of rambling in there too. I hope this makes sense. It is intricate and complex, and yet when you start to put the pieces together, you begin to see how all of this was Jesus' message from the very start, about a God who is present with us in the worst of things. It's not that God fixes it all and makes it better. It's that God is with us in the suffering, in the weakness, in the failures. And God calls us to be with other people, even our enemies, in their weakness and failures and struggles. And in so doing, it helps us as well to heal individually as we learn to sit and be honest about our weakness and struggles and failures. There you go. A lot of thoughts about the Sermon on the Mount and the message of Jesus. I'm Pastor Nate. This has been another episode of the Sunday School Remix. As always, friends, remember, the story didn't end in Sunday school. Thanks for listening to another episode of Sunday School Remix. If you'd like more resources for your walk of faith, feel free to check out my church's website, bethany-denver.org, or you can download our mobile app by searching Bethany Connect in your phone's app store.